Hello, welcome back everybody to part 2 of lecture number 4 on Excel formulas, your intro to Excel formulas. What we're going to be doing in the second part is we're going to be looking at some named ranges and then also using nested functions. So if one equation won't necessarily do it for us, how can we add a couple equations together to get what we really need out of our Excel functions? So let's start over here with our chapter 4 file that will be available for download. The first thing that you need to do is kind of understand what's going on here. We have a number of 5 different tests from 10 different analysts, and then we have the average for each test and the average for each analyst right here. And then right here what we have is the grand mean overall. And the purpose of this box down here is going to be to just identify with a simple plus sign which values are above that grand mean. Okay, so if we wanted to be able to identify those very quickly without having to check, okay, is 3.83 bigger than 5.32? No, we'll do a 0 there, or a no mark. We can do that very simply. We know from our previous lesson we could do this using one function. So if we do our function of if right here, we could say, okay, if our cell B2 is greater than the mean 5.32, and if we want to use that reference we would click on that cell right there. But if we want to make that once again a locked or absolute reference, we'd press that F4 and there we go. And then we'd say our value if true. Every time you put a mark in, you want to make sure it's in your quotes, so plus sign with quotes, and then our value if false is going to be just 2 quote signs, and that gives you a blank cell. Okay, so if B2 is larger than our G12, if that's true, then we put a plus. If it's false, we put nothing. Okay, there we go. So we know that 3.83 is less than that, so there should be nothing. And if we drag this, once again, we see that, okay, yeah, we get the ones there, and then we can drag it over, and because we've used our absolute reference right there, we get that. Okay, but what if we want to do this in a slightly different way, if we had a more complicated version of this? So let's start over. What we're going to do is we're going to name this cell right here. Okay, and we're going to name that grand mean. So what we do is first things first, select that cell. Then this is called the name box right over here. You can see that pops up when I have my cursor over it. What I'm going to do there is I'm just going to type into that grand mean. And when you name something, there's no spaces, so you can use an underscore if you need to, but that's what we want to type there. So here we go, typing once again, grand mean, and we're going to hit enter. So now, when we go to this, we should see that pop up right now. Now, what's happened within our programming is we have named this cell grand mean. So now we don't necessarily need to use our absolute reference anymore. So we'll do the same equation that we did before. Function if, okay, logical test. We still want to know, is this guy larger than? Now, instead of our typing that, we're going to just type grand mean right there. Then we'll put in value if true. Same thing, our plus sign, value if false, 2 quotes, okay, and then we can do the same thing. Drag it on down and drag it on over. Fantastic. So in this, we've named this certain cell grand mean, and you can see that it's up there in that equation bar, and that gives us all of our plus signs for the values that are greater than that 5.32. So what if we wanted to use this in some analysis? Let's move on a little bit. All right, so we're going to look at all of our different analysts here. We have 4 different analysts. We have 3 different strains that they're going to be analyzing and the readings from each of those strains. And what we want to do here is we want to be able to count how many analyst 1 has done, how many analyst 2, how many analyst 3, and how many analyst 4 has done overall. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go in and we're going to do count if. Count if. Okay, so the range that we're going to do here is going to be our analysts. So the first thing that we need to do here, we need to go back and take a step back cancel this, we need to name all of these ranges. So what we're going to do is we're going to first name this range. So before we just named a cell. Now we're going to actually name the range so you can get to it more easily. So right here we're going to select this whole thing right here. And then go up under our formulas tab. We have the create from selection right here. We're in the name manager or defined names section. So we're going to create from selection. And what you can see here is create names from values in the top rows. If you had two things, if you had rows and columns, you could also use the left column, but we're not using that. We just have our columns that we're naming. So there we go. So now what has happened in effect is if you look in your name, look at that. Now you have analysts, readings, and strains as some of your names up there. So now we're going to count a little bit easier for analyst 1, 2, 3, and 4. So now we'll go to equals. Oops, sorry. I want to use our function box once again. And we're going to use the COUNTIF function. Okay, the COUNTIF function, instead of selecting this entire range here, all we're going to write now is analysts. Okay. And then the criteria is if it is a, or E2 right there. So count if that equals that. And you can see that it pops up with 5. If we drag this equation down, look at that. We have 5 from analyst 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Same thing. We can keep on dragging that right on down. What if we want to do sum if? We want to sum up all of those values that analyst 1 came up with. So, same thing. We'll go to our equation, and we will do, let's see, we have it in there? Nope. So we will look it up. Sum if. Press enter. There it is. And our range, once again, is going to be analysts. Our criteria is that it equals analyst 1. And then our range is our reading. And remember, we named that column already. And there it is, right there. If we press enter, what that gives us is 27.39. Let's check. So here we are. We're going to check the sum right here. Equals sum. We can see all of our analyst 1s are right here. So we'll just select that right there. Look at that. 27.39, 27.39. We did it a little bit easier. So you can see that if your values were mixed up and the ordering wasn't as it is right here, this would be very, very helpful. And we can drag that down once again. And because we've used a relative reference here, this E2, it doesn't have the dollar signs with it. So as we drag, that E2 is going to move to E3, E4, and further down the column as we go. Same thing. Let's check out for analyst number 4. Equals sum analyst number 4 right here. Oh, right here. Yep, those are all the values for number 4. And we see that we have the right version there. Okay, so now if we want to get the average of these, all we need to do equals this guy divided by that. And that gives the average value. But let's say we don't want to take that extra step there. We still want the count, or we want to just be able to get the means. Equals function. We're going to use the term average if, and look, there we go. Our range once again is going to be analyst. Our criteria is going to be, once again, we want to know Now we're doing the average for the strain 1 from all of the different analysts. So instead of doing this, we should do strain. There we go. And then we say our criteria is that it's strain 1, so we want the average of all the strain 1s. And then the average range is going to be the readings. And look at that. Now we get the average for all of those without having to do these 2 steps first. So from this, by labeling all of those, we've made it a little bit easier for ourselves. Now, there's one other way to do this. If we don't want to necessarily do it this way, the problem with this lies in that as we add rows to this, let's say you did this as part of a preliminary analysis, but you were planning to add some more analysts in. Well, you'd have to start over from scratch once you did that. Remove all of the names that you put in there, because as you add rows, if I put an analyst 4 right here, strain 1, 10.00, and added that in, you can see that none of my values change. We don't have 6 values for analyst 4 by adding that in. Well, if you change it over to a table format, then you can do that. But the difference then lies in the actual equation that you're going to use. So the equation that we would use now is still COUNTIF, but we have to change the references just a little bit. You can see that we have our table 1 reference here. Anytime you have it make a table, the table is going to be given just a random name or a number based on the number of tables that you have in the whole workbook. So let's count from this one right here the same way. So instead of using our old format, which was just COUNTIF and then the label name, now we're going to do COUNTIF once again, but our range is going to be a little bit different because now we're going to add in table. So if we're typing up here, table 1, and now we have to add some brackets right there because now we're referencing from the table, and now we're going to go to analysts once again. Where's my analysts? Oops. There we go. Analyst pops right up. So we can add that in. We'll close our brackets. And now we want to reference what's the second part of this. And it's going to be, we want to know if it's analyst number 1. We will close that bracket, parentheses, and there we go. And as we drag that down, same thing. You can see that analyst equals E3. And so that's just a way to do it if it's formatted as a table. And we're going to go into a little bit later why that's important as we move into some of our nested functions in the next section. So with this one, you determined how can we label that cell right there and use that labeled cell in other equations. Then how can we label a column as a whole? So now this column is named as analyst and reference that when we are looking up some different or using some different equations. And then if we wanted to add in a table, how would that change? Let's change this up real quick. Let's show you how this changes. Now, if I go here, analyst 1, strain 1, you can see that as I added that column, that updated to a 6 right there. So that's the benefit of having this formatted as a table. If you're planning to update it frequently, having it formatted as a table is nice. Once again, there is a way to get this out of table format if you then want to import it into a statistical software. So don't worry about that too much if it's easier to use while you are creating your database. Okay, let's move on. We're going to go to our Chapter 5 now, and we're going to be talking about nested functions in general. So this is, I want to use a couple equations together. So what we have here is we have two different equations, rand and round. Rand, all it does is generate a random number between 0 and 1. And you can see that these are all random numbers. Round, all this is doing is rounding this column right here. Let's go back here. A2, this cell, to the 2 decimal places. Okay? So it's still formatted as showing 4 decimal places, but you can see it rounds it to only 2 decimal places. So what if we wanted to do this in one step? Well, we have to combine that overall. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the round function. So go here, go round, and the number we want to round is going to be a random number. So what it is, number, and we'll go back to our function was, there we go. Now we're going to use our name box right here, which is now a little bit different. Now it's kind of a formula box. As you get into formulas, it changes from your name box into a formula box. Okay, so round, now we're going to put rand in there, returns a random generated number. Don't click OK, because if you click OK, it's going to keep you working in that random. What we want to do is keep working in the round. So there we go back to round, and now with our random, okay, there we go. We want to round to 2 digits. So we'll put our 2 in there. Okay, we'll click OK, and as you can see, this is generating a random number, but once again, rounding it to 2 digits. It's a different random number than over here, and you can see that every time we change the format, the random number calculator is going to generate a different one. So if we drag this one down right there, you can see now in one step, we are generating a random number and rounding it to 2 digits. So it's the same thing as this one, but we're doing it in one step instead of 2. Before, we said, okay, let's make a column of random numbers, and then let's round that with the second equation. Now, we've done that with one nested function overall. So, let's apply this in a slightly different way now. There we go, so you can see. And this is on the if and, okay? So now we're going to go to something a little bit different. Basically, what we want to do is we want to be able to mark if both of these tests from Analyst 1 through 10 are greater than the mean once again. Okay, so we want to start with the AND function. So there we go. And we're going to go to AND, select that, and logical number 1 is going to be if. Okay, so now we are within the if, and there we go. Well, it looks like I've done this a little bit backwards here. We got to back out. It's got to be if, then and, not this way. So let's cancel this one out, and let's try again. So we'll start with the if function. There we go. And then our logical test in number 1 is going to be and. Okay? So basically we're saying if these 2 things are true, do this. If not, do this other thing. Okay? So our logical test number 1 click in there, there we go. We want to know, is this guy, B2, greater than the grand mean? Right there. But remember, we're going to be dragging this down, so what we have to do again is that F4 to make that an absolute right there. Okay, our logical number 2 is we want to know, is test number 2 larger than the mean? Same thing, F4, make it absolute. There we go. Now we can go back to our if. So now we have our logical test in there, and you can say, and B2 is bigger than the grand mean, and C2 is bigger than the grand mean. If both of those things are true, then we'll give it that plus. But if both those things are not true, we're going to give it nothing. Fantastic. So you can see that 4.41 is less than 4.97, so we get nothing there. And if we drag that down, look at that. Nice. We have these two are bigger, these two are bigger, these two are bigger, and the last two. Okay. So we've used those two formulas together. We're going to do one more part to this because I want to show you once again how to add that table formatting in, that last part. So we're going to use the table formatting from before plus our nested functions. So what we'll do right here, let's first remove our equation. There we go. And we can now go to our insert table, and it asks where the data is for our table and if we have headers, and yes, that's where the data is, and yes, it has headers. Okay, fantastic. And so we're going to do the same thing. Now we have our format as a table. Okay, so we'll do our same thing. If, and we can just start typing here. Right there. And then we'll do and. We can type once again. We will use our B2, and you can see that as I go over to that, now it's showing at test1 in brackets, which is a little bit different. Okay. And then that's going to be greater than. Okay. This guy right here, remember we want to make that absolute. So that's test number 1. Test number 2 is going to be just our C2. You can see that we are highlighting it behind. You can see the little bit of an outline there. Test number 2, greater than, once again, F4 to make that absolute. And now what we have to do is we have to make sure we close that parentheses, okay? That's our logical test. Now, the value if true, it pops up. We want our plus, and the value if not true is going to be nothing. Close those parentheses for the if, so you can want to make sure you match them up. Press your enter. There we go. And I don't have to even drag it because it's in table format, which is really, really nice. And now what happens is if we get down to this column here and we say, okay, well, I want to make sure that I'm still identifying people that have that. Well, let's do this right here. Let's add on analyst 11. And their first value is, let's say, 7. And you can see that our average changes along with that. And here's our other one here. This is going to be 10. Well, wouldn't you know, that one changes as well. The one thing you got to check, did we actually expand it? Let's make sure we expand that. And it's really nice because it automatically carries that down. So if we wanted to add more people to this, all you got to do is drag that down, add some more rows, and as you enter these averages will change. Look at this, is still referencing these columns. Even though you added in rows, because of that absolute reference, it's going to stick with those values as you move those values to different cells. So as that average changes, it's still going to keep checking that average. So if we put in analyst 12 in here, and we made this really high, like 100, you can see that all of our check marks have now gone away because our average has gone up to 13. So nobody is above both of those right now. Okay, so you can see that this is a really valuable thing if you have a spreadsheet that is you're using to identify certain criteria, and it's also something that's kind of a living, breathing document. So that covers our intro to Excel. Those are our first couple lessons. We're going to have some more a little bit later in the semester, but we'll take a little break from Excel for a minute with our next lecture coming up. Look in the modules for assignment number 4, and this is going to be an assignment where you utilize 5 of the different skills from the past 2 little part 1 and part 2. in a video that you make yourself. I've also posted a link in the module for a free download for a software called VidGrid. You're going to use that software to upload your video, and that video will come right to me as you use that software. If you have any questions in the meantime, make sure to email me. Talk to you soon.